Hey there, Mr. Terry. I'm a high school history teacher. Welcome back to another History Teacher Acts video. All right, as you can see, I still look terrible because I'm still here sick at home, but that's not going to keep me from making more videos for you. All right, a couple weeks ago, I did a reaction commentary video to a video that was kind of going viral, and it was titled Every Political Ideology in 8 Minutes. And I thought it did a really good job. Be sure to check that out if you hadn't already. But as I would expect, the creator, the Paint Explainer, did a follow-up video, and it looks like we got another set of ideologies to check out. And I'll tell you what I think along the way. All right, the original video is down below, and please make sure you're supporting that. Let's get started. All right, looking at the, looks like kind of the first frame here. We got a whole bunch of them. It's going to be interesting to see these broken down. Some I'm more familiar with than others, but all right, let's see what we got.
Anarcho-communism. Anarcho-communism combines characteristics of anarchy and communism, advocating for the abolition of private property, but the retention of personal property and collectively owned items, goods, and services. Personal property includes items intended for personal use, such as a toothbrush, a house, clothes, and a vehicle. The owner has the right to exclude others from personal items. Private property, on the other hand, usually refers to something that generates value for its owner, like a factory or a mine. Private property usually generates capital without the owner necessarily having to perform any physical labor. Anarcho-communism believes in the abolition of the state and all structures of capital, leading to a stateless, classless, and post-monetary society where the population is given full control over policymaking.
You know, that was a fantastic breakdown, actually, because first off, he separated this notion that a lot of people have wrong about personal versus private property. So we talk about communism as the abolishment of private property does not necessarily mean personal property, and understanding those differences. Private property meaning the that really is it's the means of production, right? It's the way in which you create profit, right? So you have that, and then he brought in the three things:
the state and all structures of capital, leading to a stateless, classless, and post-monetary society.
Right there, which is
state and all structures of capital, leading to a stateless, classless, and post-monetary.
The thing that is required for someone to be or something to be considered communist. Right? Moneyless, stateless, classless. Now, what's interesting is when you look at states that have proclaim themselves to be communist or trying to pursue communism, no one's ever achieved this, right? Classless, I mean, okay, maybe more or less, maybe a couple, you know, you have some kind of governing class in someone, but stateless and moneyless, no. So anarcho-communism is really something I think not a lot of people understand, because it's supposed to be communism really in its purest form if you're going back to Marxism or something like that, but moneyless, stateless, classless, and very, you know, none ever obtain all three of those. Anyway.
Society where the population is given full control over policymaking. Neoliberalism.
Yes, there is no government. There is no government elite. It is not a republic. All decisions are made democratically by the people, because there is no state. The people, it's as what Marx calls it, you know, dictatorship of the proletariat, dictatorship of the working class.
Society where the population is given full control over policymaking. Neoliberalism.
Some would say that if they were, you know, a communist state, that they may be in a situation preparatory to that, where like you have to go from capitalist control to state control and then eventually to statelessness, but that final transition never happens, right? Before the system collapses. All right, anyway.
Neoliberalism has multiple competing definitions. It's generally associated with policies like privatization, deregulation, globalization, free trade, and reductions in government spending in order to increase the role of the private sector in the economy and society.
The prevailing really ideology of much of the world now, especially in the post-Cold War world.
It's sometimes also associated, on the libertarian left side, with managerial capitalism, which advocates for the dilution of ownership within society to a point where owners can no longer exert power over businesses, and rather this power being moved towards a professional manager class. Today, the term neoliberalism is usually thought to have a highly negative connotation. social democracy.
But it's, again, it's one of those things that when you look at the tenets, a lot of people are like, oh, maybe that is what I espouse to, you know, or something like that. So there's neoconservatism, neoliberalism. In the last video, I know we talked a lot about classical liberalism and how most people, you know, somebody, maybe not most people in the world, but maybe would probably find themselves as classical liberals, even if they don't think that that word liberal means what it used to mean in its first sense when you're talking about like coming out of the Enlightenment and stuff like that.
Liberalism is usually thought to have a highly negative connotation. Social democracy. Social democracy advocates for economic and social interventions to promote social
Growing in
justice
popularity.
within a capitalist-oriented mixed economy with both private and public businesses. It likes strong welfare programs, regulation of the economy in the general interest, and prefers reforms rather than revolutions. It likes the liberal democratic framework with separation of religions from the government, elections between different political parties, etc. Social democracy usually achieves the execution of welfare programs through progressive taxation. Social liberalism.
A lot of people say that, you know, like Europe, post-Cold War Europe, and not even post-Cold War Europe, but yeah, maybe too, social democracy being that like philosophy that finds itself as a center of capitalism and socialism and trying to bring elements that, you know, brings all of that together, and something you might see you might see more of in the future. You know, I don't know. It depends how long-term successful those systems are. All right.
While social democracy says that poor people should be helped through a strong welfare state, social liberalism focuses on making social mobility easier and on providing more equality of opportunities rather than equality in all domains.
What's the mechanism?
It likes a little bit of intervention from the government into the economy in the name of ensuring economic justice as well as civil liberty. Social capitalism.
All right.
Social capitalism is a combination of social democracy.
Some people are going to be like, oxymoron, but no, there's not as many oxymorons as you think.
Social liberalism and capitalism. Third way. The
Just
third way
everything.
tries to reconcile right-wing and
What is
left-wing
this?
politics, combining stances from social democracy and social liberalism. It supports
centrism?
workfare, which is a governmental plan under which people are required to accept public service jobs or to participate in job training to obtain the benefits. It also seeks a compromise between a purely free economic system as supported by classical liberals and a welfare state as supported by social liberals. One of the third way's key goals is to create a social investment state,
Anyone
which
else
helps
heard of that? I've
people
never
climb
heard
the
of
social
this
ladder through
terminology.
workforce development and education rather than handouts. Marxism.
Okay.
Marxism has
So
developed.
it's like you're going to get a lot of support from the government, but it's not going to be direct money into your account. It's going to be through what, job opportunities, basically, they said. All right, Marxism. All right. See how contentious it's going
development
to
and
be.
education rather than handouts. Marxism. Marxism has developed over time into various branches and schools of thought, so no single definitive Marxist theory exists. Classical Marxism seeks to create a communist society. It makes a distinction between the minority who owns the means of production, called the bourgeoisie, and the vast majority of the population who produce
proletariat.
goods and
Or,
services, called the proletariat.
not the
It says
proletariat,
that
gotcha.
capitalism exploits
Bourgeoisie
and
and
oppresses the proletariat, making it an economically unsustainable model as it causes proletarian revolutions. Marxism also believes that history
Well,
can be
it also advocates for it, but on a global scale. Marx advocated for global workers' revolutions. He saw that it couldn't just be a state, you know, there's like state communism, which you're going to see with like Stalin, but Marx saw that this had to be an international revolution, you know, for this to work, that people need to start identifying not as much by nationality and all that, but by social classes, okay, specifically working class, proletariat versus the bourgeoisie.
model as it causes proletarian revolutions.
And he advocated for that,
Marxism
though.
also believes that history can be viewed in stages of development based on which class holds a dictatorship over the other classes, and that today the world is under the dictatorship of the bourgeoisie. Following the overthrow of the bourgeoisie, Marxism believes that a dictatorship of the proletariat must be
mentioned that.
established to eradicate capitalism and begin the transition to communism. This stage, where the working class has absolute power over all other classes and has ownership of the means of production, is usually called socialism. Lenin classes and has ownership of the means of production is usually called socialism. Lenin
Sure. And potentially as a vehicle to, again, the moneyless, stateless, classless society there. So, okay, he hit kind of the classical Marxism there. which a lot of people don't equate with a lot of the other groups that claim to be Marxist. You show there's Trotskyism, Stalin had his own deal,
Leninism.
you know, Mao is going to have his own deal. All right, Lenin. All right, this is where we can start breaking down things.
Leninism, also known as Bolshevism, believes in the establishment of a dictatorship of the proletariat led by a revolutionary vanguard party. The Revolution Vanguard Party should be composed of the most educated workers, with the objective of educating larger sections of the working class and starting the revolution. Neo-Libertarian.
Okay. I mean, you might be like, man, that sounds sure a lot like just Marxism. And it's kind of interesting. I mean, of the people that were influenced by Marx, Lenin, Mao, you know, the list, Trotsky, whatever. Who do you think was the closest to Marx out of that? Let me know down below. What do you think about that?
Educating larger sections of the working class and starting the revolution. Neo-Libertarianism. Neo-Libertarianism thinks that the libertarians' value of freedom from interference by other people is incompatible with a strictly limited government, and thus it is generally supportive of government involvement in society as long as it promotes greater liberty. It is sometimes associated with neoconservatism, which is the idea that typically advocates the promotion of democracy and interventionism in international affairs, including peace through strength.
That's interesting, because neo-libertarianism, because I don't know as much about like the neo form of it. I thought that just kind of, again, historically, you would think just the main tenet for libertarianism is limited government. But this is actually saying, no, you actually have more government because the government will promote liberty and anarcho-libertarianism or whatever you want to call it. So interesting. So it believes that the government can create liberty. Interesting.
Democracy and interventionism in international affairs, including peace through strength. Classical liberalism.
Well, libertarians are generally isolationists, though.
In international affairs.
This almost doesn't sound like libertarianism at all, huh? It's a new form of it. So yeah, neoconservatism is a lot closer.
Including peace through strength.
Interesting.
Classical liberalism. Classical liberalism thinks that individual freedom and a free market create a balanced economic equilibrium as long as monopolies aren't allowed to develop and destroy competitiveness.
And that's where the government intervention is. So, you know, it's supposed to have a lot of free market, but the government's role in economy is to not allow monopolies, because that would eventually reduce freedoms and a free market. It would destroy a free market.
Economic equilibrium, as long as monopolies aren't allowed to develop and destroy competitiveness. It sees free trade as a path to universal peace and prosperity, and it likes as little government intervention as possible. If compared to social liberalism, it thinks more negatively about social policies and taxation, and it advocates deregulation. Anarcho-capitalism. Anarcho-capitalism is anarchist because it doesn't like a centralized state. And
if you want to see some of this in live, the guy Malay, is it Malay? Is that you say his name? Who just won election in Argentina is an ANCAP, anarcho-capitalist, and a lot of people were, you know, he won the vote, and from people thinking that maybe this is a way that they can get out of the economic ruin that Argentina is in right now. But he's an ANCAP. That's his thing. So if you want to see a modern person practicing that, it'll be interesting when they get sworn in and see what that actually could look like in a state like Argentina. So,
Anarcho-capitalism is anarchist because it doesn't like a centralized state, and it's capitalist because it likes systems of private property enforced by private agencies, free markets, and self-ownership. As no centralized state would exist, there would be no taxation, and private companies would take the role of the police. Nationalism.
Private police.
Be no taxation, and private companies would take the role of the police.
Interesting. What do you think's the outcome of that? Would be the outcome of that, hypothetically?
Nationalism. Nationalism holds the belief that the nation should be congruent with the state. A nation is a large type of social organization where a collective identity has emerged from a combination of shared features across a given population, such as language, history, ethnicity, etc. A state is a centralized political organization that imposes and enforces rules over a population within a territory. One of nationalism's key goals is to maintain its sovereignty over its homeland, usually through a nation-state. It holds that each nation should govern itself, free from outside interference. When a nation puts its own interest above all others at any cost, it's called ultranationalism. The opposite of ultranationalism is universal nationalism. Georgism.
Man, that was so vague. to see that with nationalism, because there's so many different forms of it. You can be nationalist and isolationist, but also you can be nationalist and also imperialist as well.
Also
Georgism.
known as the single tax movement.
I've heard this interestingly talked about in our Discord server. Somebody was bringing this up. Was it? I also heard it talked about in Mr. Beat's Discord too.
Georgism.
I think.
Georgism, also known as the single tax movement, thinks that although people should own the value that they produce themselves, the value derived from land should belong equally to all members of society. It believes that there should only be one tax, the land value tax, because it views property rights as only extending to the properties of labor and capital, and since land is neither, it's free real estate.
And if you don't own land, you basically don't pay tax.
Radicalism.
Interesting. Radicalism. Interesting. Is that a specific ideology?
Radicalism, or radical liberalism, was a historical set of movements within classical liberalism and represented the left wing of the historical movement. Radical liberalism took the principles behind liberalism and applied them to its conclusion. For example, a classical liberal might espouse that a democratic system of government and the right to vote should be given. In turn, a radical liberal would take such a statement to its conclusion, that being that women, those without property, immigrants, slaves, etc., should all be given the right to vote. Corporatocracy.
All right.
Corporatocracy is an economic system in which the state intervenes within the economy for the benefit of a select number of corporations, especially in the context of squashing competition.
Is this popular? Do we have any corporate tracks?
Variant of corporatocracy is Lenin socialism, which is a pejorative term for an economic system based on a government that offers subsidies to weak, bad, or bankrupt companies so that they remain in the market. Cyberocracy.
It's like oh my God, that sounds hella corrupt, doesn't it? The government works with specific corporations to destroy other ones. Damn. Anyone signing up for that? I mean, if you were that corporation, then you love it. But like everyone else is like, no, that's bullcrap. Cyberocracy. Okay, now we're getting the future forms of ideologies.
Cyberocracy represents the advocacy of a government that is largely automated or partially automated and de facto ruled by computers and artificial intelligence.
Really?
Integralism.
Wait, what? I want to know more about this. Just we're run by AI government,
and de facto ruled by computers and artificial intelligence.
ChatGPT runs the country.
Integralism. Integralism is the principle that the church should be the basis of public law and public policy within civil society. It's usually a deeply traditionalist doctrine, and it doesn't like secularism. Reactionarism.
That sounds, if it's sounds like theocracy in a way. I mean, well, in a theocracy, at least the government leaders are the same as the religious leaders, but same idea, the exact opposite of separation of church and state. All right, reactionarism. This should be interesting because this is a term you might be hearing a lot more about, reactionary politics. And I know it's something I've looked into more recently.
Reactionarism is a philosophy that advocates for the restoration or preservation of traditional social, political, and economic systems.
People say that's sometimes at the heart of conservatism, especially,
It is characterized by a rejection of progressive or liberal ideas and a belief that society has become too modern or innovative.
Preserve the status quo kind of thing.
It's the philosophy.
Oh, this is Jacobinism. So this is like probably French Revolution. The Jacobins were the at least for a time, the most radical seeming of the revolution, the different political parties in the French Revolution that actually wanted to see like the monarchy be abolished. And in the early years, that wasn't as popular of the revolution, but then becomes
society
more
has become too modern or innovative. Jacobinism. It's the philosophy of a complete dismantling of an old system with a completely radical and new structure. It's historically seen as one of the most revolutionary and important movements throughout modern history, as it played a huge role in the French Revolution, where
we'll see if it does it. My question was going to be, before I forgot, were there other people proposing that they are Jacobins outside of the French Revolution?
Monarchy was abolished
like
and
using
replaced
that
by a
terminology?
republic. I'll be making a part 3. Subscribe and activate the bell to see it.
He did every Greek god explained in 11 minutes. That sounds cool. Let me know if you want to see that. All right, final comments. All right. Hey, another good little breakdown for this stuff. So some of them are like, I didn't even know like are necessarily ideologies necessarily, but you can see a lot of ideologies now that he's getting into like a second level of this that cross with other ones. And have different historical context. Hopefully I was able to bring that in. That was my goal in the first video, and you know, hopefully was trying to do that here, is talk about it from a contextual perspective. As one of the main things I think I brought out in the last video was the platforms of certain ideologies, like at least the names of them change over time, right? So like we spent a lot of time last time at the first video talking about how the idea of liberalism or just liberal, how that has changed where over time, where it becomes something, you know, a lot of people see as not what those early definitions were. And I think that can be kind of enlightening when you look at the history of ideologies, not just in their current states. So with that, again, another interesting video there. What do you think about his breakdowns there? I mean, other than you saying, oh, it's overly simplified or something like that, do you think anything is wrong with that, or should be, you know, put an asterisk next to it or something like that? I also had a few questions along the way. Hopefully you're answering those down in the comments. And with that, y'all, we'll see you next time.